Welcome to our peaceful corner of the internet, where stories are here to help you drift off to a place of rest and calm. Tonight we invite you to settle down, let go of the day's worries, and sink into a soothing bedtime story crafted just for you. Each word, each scene is carefully designed to help your mind unwind, your body relax, and your thoughts slow down. So, find a comfortable position, take a deep breath, and let the story gently guide you to a restful night's sleep. Close your eyes, listen closely, and let tonight's journey begin. Mira had always loved the woods near her home. She found solace there, away from the noise of the city and the constant ping of her phone. Today, though, something felt different. It was a warm afternoon, the kind that makes you want to lie in a patch of sun and drift off into a dream. Mira was halfway down her favorite trail when she noticed a small, overgrown path leading off to the left. It was strange. She had walked this trail countless times, yet she had never seen this turn before. Must be new, she thought. But a closer look revealed that the path wasn't new at all. It was ancient, covered in brambles and leaves that seemed untouched by human footsteps. Curiosity tugged at her, and before she could think twice, her feet were already leading her down the narrow trail. The air changed as she stepped into the hidden path. It became cooler, almost crisp, and the sunlight dimmed, filtered through the thick canopy overhead. It felt like stepping into a different world. The trees here were tall and ancient, their trunks covered in thick moss, their roots snaking across the forest floor like veins. The leaves shimmered in shades of emerald, silver, and deep purple, unlike any trees she had seen before. Then she heard it, a soft whisper, like the rustling of leaves, but more deliberate. Mira paused, her heart racing. She strained to listen, but the sound faded away. "It's just the wind," she muttered, trying to convince herself. But a shiver ran down her spine. A small bird with brilliant blue feathers landed on a branch right in front of her. It tilted its head, watching her with bright, curious eyes. Mira laughed softly. "Hey there, little guy." "Hello, traveler," the bird chirped back. Mira froze. She blinked, staring at the bird. Did you just speak?" "Yes, I did," the bird replied cheerfully. It fluttered its wings and hopped closer. "This is the gentle forest, a place where magic still lingers, though it fades with each passing year. Few humans find their way here anymore." Mira's mouth fell open. "Magic? This can't be real." "Oh, it's quite real," the bird said, its tiny chest puffing up with pride. "I am Tycho, a guide of the forest. You must be someone special to have found this place." Mira felt a mix of wonder and disbelief. She had read stories of enchanted forests as a child, but this was impossible, wasn't it? "This has to be a dream," she murmured. "Maybe it is, maybe it isn't," Tycho said cryptically, fluttering off the branch. "But if it's a dream, wouldn't you like to see where it leads?" Despite herself, Mira nodded. The bird's bright eyes and friendly demeanor calmed her nerves. "All right, lead the way," she said, following Tycho deeper into the forest. They walked for what felt like hours, though the sun never seemed to move in the sky. The forest around her felt alive. Every so often, she thought she heard the whispers again, soft voices carried on the wind. It was as if the trees themselves were talking. "You're hearing them, aren't you?" Tycho asked, glancing back at her. Mira nodded. "What are they saying?" "The trees remember everything," Tycho explained. "They hold the memories of the forest, of every creature that has lived here, every change in the seasons, and even the humans who once walked these paths. They speak in whispers, sharing their stories with those who can listen." Mira felt a strange sense of belonging here, like she was meant to find this place. "Why can I hear them?" "Because the forest chose you," Tycho said simply. "It has been waiting a long time for someone who can help restore its magic." Mira stopped in her tracks. "Restore its magic?" I don't understand. I'm just a normal person. I don't have any special powers." "Not all magic is about power," Tico said, landing on her shoulder. "Sometimes it's about kindness and the willingness to listen. The forest has been fading because humans have forgotten about it. But you, Mira, you can change that." Before Mira could respond, they stepped into a clearing. In the center stood an enormous tree, its trunk as wide as a small house. The bark was silver, and its leaves were a dazzling array of colors, shifting like a living rainbow. It was the most beautiful thing Mira had ever seen. A soft, glowing light appeared in front of the tree, growing brighter until it took the shape of a woman. Her hair was a cascade of leaves, and her skin looked like the smooth bark of a young tree. She smiled at Mira, her eyes filled with warmth and wisdom. "Welcome, Mira," the figure said. "I am Silva, the spirit of the gentle forest. It has been many years since a human has heard the call of the trees." Mira felt her breath catch in her throat. "I don't know what's happening," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You have found your way here because the forest needs you," Silva said gently. "Its magic is fading, and with it, the life of every creature here. But there is still hope. You have a kind heart, Mira, and that is where the true magic lies." Mira felt tears welling up in her eyes, though she couldn't say why. "What can I do?" "Trust yourself," Silva said. "Listen to the forest, follow its whispers. You will find the answers as you go. Your journey is just beginning." The spirit's light dimmed, fading back into the great tree. Mira stood there feeling a rush of emotions, fear, excitement, and a sense of purpose she had never felt before. "Come on," Tico chirped. "There's so much more to see." With a deep breath, Mira nodded and followed the little bird, her heart full of wonder and anticipation. The adventure had just begun. The sun seemed frozen in a perpetual golden afternoon as Mira followed Tico through the winding paths of the gentle forest. Every step felt like peeling back the layers of a dream, strange, yet oddly familiar. The colors around her grew deeper, richer, as if the very fabric of reality here was woven with magic. It was unlike any forest she had ever seen. She could feel the life pulsing beneath the surface, a gentle hum resonating with her heartbeat. Tico chirped happily, flitting from branch to branch ahead of her. "We're almost there, Mira," the little bluebird said. "The Glade of Echoes is just beyond this ridge. It's a special place, a sanctuary for old magic." "What kind of magic?" Mira asked, stepping carefully over a tangle of exposed roots. "All kinds," Tico replied, his voice lowering almost to a whisper. "Echoes of the past, the songs of ancient trees, and the voices of creatures long gone. It's a place where time stands still, and memories linger like the morning mist." Mira felt a shiver of anticipation. She didn't know what to expect, but she knew she was about to experience something extraordinary. As they crested the ridge, the forest opened up into a wide, sunlit glade. The grass was a vibrant green, dotted with tiny white flowers that seemed to glow in the sunlight. In the center of the glade stood a small pond, its surface as smooth as glass, reflecting the sky like a perfect mirror. Mira approached the pond, drawn to its stillness. She peered into the water and gasped. It wasn't just reflecting her face. She could see images flickering beneath the surface, like fragments of a forgotten story. She saw a young girl dancing in the moonlight, an old man carving runes into a tree trunk, and a family of deer drinking from the pond's edge. "What is this place?" she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "It's the Glade of Echoes," Tico said softly. "The water holds the memories of the forest. It shows glimpses of the past, moments that have shaped this place." Mira knelt by the pond, reaching out her hand. As her fingers touched the water, ripples spread across the surface, distorting the images. The scene shifted, and she saw a woman with flowing hair made of leaves, Silva, the spirit of the forest. She was younger here, vibrant and full of life. Mira watched as Silva raised her hands, weaving light and shadow together, creating a small, shimmering orb of magic. She released it into the air, where it floated away, leaving a trail of golden sparkles behind. Mira pulled back her hand, her heart racing. "Was that Silva?" "Yes," Tico said, his voice tinged with sadness. "That was long ago when the forest was still strong. Silva's magic was powerful then, a part of every leaf and stream. But as humans lost their connection to nature, the magic faded. The forest became hidden, a forgotten place." Mira looked up at the bird. "Is that why I'm here? To help bring back the magic?" Tico fluttered down to the ground beside her. "Perhaps. Or maybe the forest simply needed someone to listen, someone who could feel its pain and its beauty." Before Mira could respond, she heard a sound, a faint, melodic humming. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, like the forest itself was singing. The sound grew louder, filling the air with a sweet, haunting melody. Mira stood up, looking around, trying to find the source. "It's the Song of Echoes," Tico explained. "The glade is speaking to you. Listen carefully, Mira. It might have a message for you." Mira closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. It was beautiful, but there was a sadness to it, a longing that tugged at her heart. As she listened, the whispers she had heard earlier grew louder, forming words she could almost understand. "Seek the river's bend," the voices seemed to say. "Where the willow weeps, the path begins." Mira opened her eyes, feeling a rush of urgency. "The river's bend, what does it mean?" Tico hopped closer. "It's a clue, a part of the forest's guidance. The willow they speak of is a sacred tree, one of the oldest in the forest. It's said to guard a hidden path, a place where the veil between worlds is thin." "A hidden path?" Mira repeated. Her curiosity burned brighter now, mingled with a sense of purpose. "We have to go there?" Tico nodded. "Yes, but the journey won't be easy. The deeper we go, the stronger the magic becomes and the more the forest will test you." Mira squared her shoulders, determination shining in her eyes. "I'm ready. Let's go." They left the glade of echoes behind, the melodic hum fading into the distance as they ventured deeper into the heart of the forest. The trees grew taller, their branches intertwining overhead, like the arches of a grand cathedral. Sunlight barely pierced through the thick canopy now, casting the forest floor in shades of deep green and blue. The air was different here, thicker, charged with a tingling energy that made Mira's skin prickle. It felt as if they had stepped into a place where time had slowed to a crawl, where the world outside ceased to exist. They reached a bend in the path, and Mira spotted a tall willow tree, its long branches draping down like a curtain. It stood by the edge of a wide river, its waters flowing gently. The willow's leaves shimmered silver in the dim light, and a soft breeze rustled through them, whispering secrets that only the wind could hear. "This is it," Tico said quietly. "The willow. Beyond its branches lies the hidden path." Mira hesitated for just a moment, taking a deep breath. Then she stepped forward, parting the curtain of leaves. She felt a rush of cool air, and suddenly the world around her changed. The forest became darker, the light dimmer. She had crossed into a place that felt older, more mystical, a place where the magic of the gentle forest was still strong, but wild and untamed. "What happens now?" Mira asked, her voice barely a whisper. Tico flew to her shoulder, his tiny claws gripping her shirt. "Now, we discover what the forest wants to show you. And we must be careful. This path is not for the faint of heart." With a nod, Mira took her first step into the unknown, the sound of the river fading behind her. The adventure was just beginning. and she felt a thrill of excitement mixed with the weight of destiny. Whatever lay ahead, she knew she couldn't turn back now. Mira stepped beyond the willow's curtain, her breath catching as the air grew colder and the light dimmed to a soft twilight. The atmosphere was different here, filled with a tension she hadn't felt before. It was as if the forest was holding its breath, watching her every move. The leaves whispered above her, though their voices now carried an edge, as if warning her to turn back. Tico perched on her shoulder, unusually quiet. His bright blue feathers seemed duller in this strange light. "You've entered the Vale of Shadows," he murmured. "This part of the forest is hidden even from most of its own creatures. It's a place where the old magic lingers, but it's not always friendly." "What do you mean?" Mira asked, her voice barely a whisper. Tico's eyes darted around, as if expecting something to leap out from the darkness. "The Vale is where the forest's memories turn to shadows. It's a place of trials, where those who enter must confront their deepest fears and desires. If you can make it through, the forest will trust you. But if you fail, you could be lost here, forever." Mira swallowed hard, feeling a flutter of fear in her chest. "I didn't come this far to turn back now," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. "That's the spirit," Tico replied, though his chirp lacked its usual cheerfulness. He flitted ahead, his wings making a soft, whispering sound in the still air. "Stay close, Mira, and whatever you do, don't stray from the path." Mira nodded, stepping carefully along the narrow trail. It was barely visible now, more of a suggestion of a path than a clear walkway. Shadows danced on the ground, shifting and twisting as if they had a life of their own. She tried not to look too closely at them, but it was hard not to notice the shapes, figures that seemed to rise from the earth, reaching out with long, dark fingers. "What are those?" Mira asked, her voice shaking. "They're the echoes," Tico explained softly. "Fragments of memories, shadows of those who once walked this forest. They mean no harm, but they can be unsettling." Unsettling was an understatement. Mira's heart pounded in her chest as she walked, her eyes darting from shadow to shadow. She could almost hear voices, faint and distant, like whispers carried on the wind. They were speaking words she couldn't quite make out, but their tone was pleading, full of longing and sorrow. Then the shadows parted, and Mira found herself standing before a massive stone archway covered in ivy. The arch seemed ancient, its stone worn smooth by time. Runes were carved into its surface, glowing faintly with a soft silvery light. The path continued beyond the arch, leading into a deeper darkness that felt almost tangible, like a heavy curtain. "This is it," Tico said. "The gateway of reflections. You must pass through it alone." Mira looked at Tico, her eyes wide. "Alone? You can't come with me?" Tico shook his head. "I can guide you this far, but beyond the gateway the forest will test you. It's different for everyone who enters. You'll have to face whatever it shows you." Mira felt a chill run down her spine. She looked at the dark path beyond the archway, then back at Tico. "What if I fail?" Tico's gaze softened. "You won't fail, Mira. You've come this far because you're strong and kind. Trust yourself. And remember, the forest chose you for a reason." Taking a deep breath, Mira stepped forward. As she crossed beneath the stone arch, she felt a wave of cold wash over her, like plunging into icy water. The world around her blurred, the trees and shadows melting away into a grey mist. When the mist cleared, Mira found herself standing in a clearing that looked nothing like the forest she had just left. The air was warm, and the sky above was a deep twilight blue. In the center of the clearing was a large pond, its waters as still as glass. Mira approached it, drawn to its mirror-like surface. As she looked down, she didn't see her reflection. Instead, she saw a different version of herself, an image of her younger self, standing barefoot in a meadow, laughing as she spun around in circles, her arms outstretched like a child pretending to fly. Mira felt a pang of nostalgia. She remembered that day. It was one of the few times she had felt truly free, before the weight of the world had settled on her shoulders. "You were happy then," a voice said softly. Mira looked up, startled. Across the pond stood a figure cloaked in shadows. It had her face, but its eyes were cold, filled with a sadness and bitterness that made Mira shiver. "Who are you?" Mira asked. "I am you," the shadow replied. "I am your fears, your regrets, the part of you that you try to bury deep inside." Mira took a step back, her heart pounding. "Why are you here?" "Because this is your trial," the shadow said. "You must confront me. You must face the parts of yourself that you deny, the parts that hold you back." Mira clenched her fists. "I don't deny anything." The shadow smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "Don't you? You hide your fears behind a mask of strength. You pretend you don't need anyone, that you're fine on your own. But you're not. You're lonely, and you're scared." Tears pricked at Mira's eyes. "That's not true," she whispered. "It is," the shadow insisted. "And until you face it, you can't move forward." Mira felt the weight of the shadow's words pressing down on her. She wanted to argue, to deny it, but deep down she knew it was right. She had always put up walls, kept people at a distance. She was afraid of getting hurt, afraid of being vulnerable. Slowly, she took a deep breath and stepped closer to the pond. "You're right," she said quietly. "I am scared. But I'm here now and I'm trying. I'm not going to let my fears control me anymore." The shadow's expression softened. It nodded, and then, like a wisp of smoke, it dissolved into the air, leaving only Mira's reflection in the pond. The air around her warmed, the mist lifting. She felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She turned to find Tico waiting for her at the edge of the clearing. "You did it," Tico chirped, his eyes bright with pride. Mira smiled, wiping away a tear. "I did." As they stepped back through the archway, the forest seemed to sigh in relief, the shadows receding. The path ahead was brighter now, the air filled with the soft sound of birdsong. Mira took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. The forest had tested her, and she had faced her fears. Whatever lay ahead, she knew she was ready. "Let's keep going," she said, her voice filled with new resolve. Tico nodded, and together they ventured deeper into the heart of the gentle forest, the next chapter of their journey waiting just beyond the trees. The deeper Mira ventured into the forest, the more she felt its magic enveloping her like a warm blanket. The tension of the veil of shadows had lifted, replaced by a gentle, soothing energy. Tico flew beside her, his feathers gleaming once more in the dappled sunlight that streamed through the canopy. "You did well back there," Tico chirped. "Not many can face the shadows of their own heart and emerge stronger." Mira gave him a small, grateful smile. "It wasn't easy, but I feel lighter now, like I've left something behind that I didn't need anymore." "That's the forest's way," Tico replied. "It helps those who are willing to change, who are open to its lessons." They walked in silence for a while, the sounds of the forest filling the air, a distant rustle of leaves, the occasional chirp of birds, and the soft murmur of a hidden stream. It was peaceful here, but Mira sensed that the calm was only temporary. The forest had tested her once, and she knew it wasn't finished yet. As they continued, the trees around them began to change. Their trunks grew taller and more twisted, their bark a dark, silvery grey. The leaves above shimmered with a strange, iridescent light, like moonlight caught in a spider's web. It felt as if they had stepped into another world entirely. "Where are we now?" Mira asked, looking up at the towering trees. This is the Whispering Grove, Tico said, lowering his voice. The trees here are ancient, older than any other part of the forest. They remember everything, every whisper of the wind, every secret ever spoken in their shade. Mira felt a shiver run down her spine. Are they listening to us now? Tico nodded. Always. The grove is a place of knowledge but also of caution. Be mindful of your words here, Mira. The trees might hold on to them longer than you'd expect. Mira glanced around, half expecting to see faces in the twisted bark, but the trees remained still and silent, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. She took a deep breath and followed Tico down the narrow, winding path that led deeper into the grove. The air here felt different, thicker, charged with a kind of electric anticipation. Mira could hear faint whispers, like a chorus of voices just out of earshot. They rose and fell, blending together into a soft, melodic hum. She strained to listen, trying to make out the words, but they were too indistinct. Tico landed on her shoulder, his tiny claws gripping her shirt. The trees are speaking to each other. They're sharing their stories, their memories. What kind of stories? Mira asked, captivated by the sound. Everything, Tico said. Tales of the changing seasons, of animals and spirits who have passed through, of moments both grand and small. But there are also secrets buried here, hidden among the roots and branches, secrets that the forest may choose to reveal or to keep hidden forever. Mira's curiosity burned brighter than ever. She felt as though she was standing on the edge of a great discovery, like she was about to uncover something important. She stepped off the path, drawn towards a particularly large tree with a thick, knotted trunk. Its bark was etched with deep lines like wrinkles on an old face. "What's this one's story?" she asked, placing her hand on the rough surface. The moment her fingers touched the bark, the whispers grew louder, forming words that Mira could finally understand. "The time of dusk," the voices said. "The child who weeps, the spirit who waits." Mira pulled her hand back, startled. "What does that mean?" Tico fluttered nervously. "It's a riddle, Mira. The grove often speaks in riddles. It's their way of guiding those who seek answers." Mira frowned, trying to make sense of the words. The time of dusk. That could be evening, when the light fades. But the child who weeps? And the spirit who waits? Tico cocked his head, thinking. There is a legend in the forest, an old tale about a lost child who cried beneath these trees long ago. They say she was searching for something, someone, and that a spirit of the forest took pity on her, staying by her side until she found what she was looking for. Mira's heart ached at the thought. What happened to her? No one knows, Tico said quietly. The story ends there. Some say she found her way home. Others believe she became a part of the forest, her spirit lingering here, waiting for something. Mira felt a pull, an almost magnetic urge to follow the path deeper into the grove. "We need to find her," she said. "Maybe she's still here, waiting for someone to listen." Tico hesitated, then nodded. "If you feel called to, then we should go, but be careful, Mira. The grove has its own rules, and not everything here is as it seems." They continued walking, the whispers growing louder with each step. The path narrowed, and the trees pressed in close, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out most of the light. It felt like they were walking through a tunnel, the world beyond the grove fading away. At the end of the path, they came to a small clearing. In the center stood a stone statue covered in moss. It was the figure of a young girl, her head bowed, her hands clasped as if in prayer. There was something heartbreakingly sad about the way she stood, frozen in time. "This must be her," Mira said softly. The lost child. Tico flew to the statue, perching on its shoulder. Yes, the forest remembers her. It keeps her here, a reminder of her sorrow. Mira knelt beside the statue, brushing away some of the moss. As she did, she felt a wave of sadness wash over her, so intense it nearly took her breath away. It wasn't her own sadness, it was the child's, lingering here for all these years. "You don't have to be alone anymore," Mira whispered. "I'm here. I'll listen." The air around them stilled, the whispers of the trees falling silent. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of Mira's own breathing. Then a soft, ethereal voice filled the clearing. "Thank you," the voice said. It was light and airy like the sound of wind chimes. "I've waited so long for someone to hear me." Mira looked up, her eyes wide. "Who are you?" "I was once a child, lost and afraid," the voice replied. "I searched for my family, but I never found them. I became part of the forest, a spirit bound to this place." Tico looked at Mira, his eyes wide with wonder. "You found her, Mira. You freed her voice." "What can we do to help you?" Mira asked. "You've already done it," the spirit said. "By listening, by remembering me. I can move on now, knowing that I haven't been forgotten." The statue seemed to shimmer for a moment, and then it dissolved into a cloud of golden light, swirling upwards and vanishing into the treetops. The clearing brightened, the shadows lifting. Mira felt tears on her cheeks, but they were happy tears. She stood up, her heart lighter than it had ever been. "We did it," she whispered. "Yes," Tico chirped softly. "And the forest thanks you, Mira. You've proven yourself once more." They turned back towards the path, the trees parting for them as they left the Whispering Grove behind. The air was filled with birdsong now, the forest celebrating with them. Mira took Tico's tiny claw in her hand, feeling a new sense of hope and purpose. The journey wasn't over, but she knew she was on the right path. "Let's keep going," she said, her voice filled with quiet joy. There's so much more to discover. As Mira and Tico left the solemn shadows of the Whispering Grove behind, the forest seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The air felt lighter, filled with the scent of blooming flowers and the sweet, crisp fragrance of pine. Sunlight danced through the leaves, casting golden patterns on the ground, and Mira could hear the cheerful calls of distant birds. "We're nearing the Moonlight Meadow," Tico announced, fluttering ahead with renewed excitement. It's one of the most beautiful places in the entire forest, a sanctuary of peace and light. Mira quickened her pace, eager to see this magical place. After the intensity of the Vale of Shadows and the deep emotion of the Whispering Grove, she longed for a moment of pure beauty and tranquility. The trees gradually thinned out, and the forest floor turned from dark, mossy earth to a carpet of soft grass, speckled with wildflowers. Mira could see a wide expanse of meadow opening up before her, bathed in a silvery, ethereal glow. Even though the sun was still high in the sky, the meadow seemed to shimmer with moonlight, as if it existed in a perpetual twilight. "How is this possible?" Mira asked, her eyes wide with wonder. Tico landed gently on her shoulder. "The Moonlight Meadow is touched by old magic. It's said that the light of the moon lives here, even during the day. The forest keeps this place as a reminder of the bond between the sun and the moon, the light and the dark." Mira stepped into the meadow, feeling the grass tickle her ankles. It was softer than any she had felt before, like walking on a cloud. The wildflowers nodded in the gentle breeze, their petals glowing with a faint luminescence. She could hear a faint, musical hum in the air, like the forest was singing a lullaby. "It's beautiful," Mira whispered, her voice hushed with awe. Tico chirped in agreement. This meadow has a special song, one that only the forest's most trusted friends can hear. Listen closely, Mira. The song might tell you something important. Mira closed her eyes, focusing on the sound. It was faint at first, like the soft strumming of a harp, but as she listened, it grew clearer. The music was filled with a gentle, soothing rhythm, mingling with the whisper of the wind and the rustle of leaves. It seemed to carry a message, a story that was both ancient and new. The moon and the sun danced together, hand in hand, the song seemed to say. They chase each other across the sky, never meeting, but always longing. They are different, yet they complete each other. Mira opened her eyes, feeling a pang of sadness at the words. The sun and the moon, they're always apart, but they need each other to create balance. Tico nodded. Yes, it's a tale as old as time. They love each other, but they can never be together. It's their eternal dance, one of longing and sacrifice. Mira felt a lump in her throat. That's so sad, to love something so deeply and yet never be able to hold it close. The meadow seemed to sigh in agreement, the flowers swaying as if they too felt the sorrow of the story. But then the song changed, the melody became lighter, more hopeful. Though they cannot touch, they find ways to show their love, the song continued. The moon reflects the light of the sun, casting it down to the earth in silver beams. And the sun rises each day, painting the sky in colors that speak of the moon's beauty. Mira smiled, wiping a tear from her cheek. Even when they're apart, they still find ways to be together, in their own way. Tico chirped happily. Exactly. It's a reminder that love doesn't always have to be seen to be felt. Sometimes it's the quiet moments, the small gestures, that mean the most. Mira took a deep breath, letting the sweet, floral scent of the meadow fill her lungs. She felt a sense of peace wash over her, as if the song had wrapped her in a warm embrace. She sat down in the grass, watching the light dance across the petals of the flowers. Tico fluttered down beside her, nestling into the crook of her arm. For a while, they sat in silence, simply enjoying the beauty of the meadow. It was a rare moment of calm in the midst of their journey, and Mira was grateful for it. She leaned back, letting the sun warm her face, and felt a sense of contentment she hadn't known in a long time. But as the song of the meadow began to fade, replaced by the gentle hum of the forest, Mira sensed that something was about to change. The air around her grew still, the breeze dying down. The light dimmed, and the silvery glow of the meadow took on a faint, purple hue. Tico looked up, his feathers ruffling nervously. "Mira, do you feel that?" Mira nodded, sitting up straight. "Something's coming." Just then a ripple ran through the grass, like a wave passing over the surface of a pond. The flowers swayed violently, their petals fluttering in the sudden gust of wind. Mira stood up, her heart pounding.
"What's happening?" she asked, her voice tight with fear. Before Tico could answer, the sky above them darkened. A shadow passed over the meadow, blocking out the sunlight. Mira looked up and gasped. A large, dark shape was moving across the sky, circling above them like a storm cloud. "That's no cloud," Tico whispered. "It's the Nighthawk." Mira's eyes widened. She had heard stories of the Nighthawk, a great bird of prey that roamed the skies of the forest, cloaked in shadows. It was said to be a guardian, but also a harbinger of change, appearing only when something momentous was about to happen. The Nighthawk let out a piercing cry, its wings cutting through the air like a knife. It swooped down low, passing just above the meadow, its feathers glinting with a metallic sheen. Mira felt a rush of wind as it flew past, so powerful that it almost knocked her off her feet. "What does it want?" Mira asked, shielding her eyes as she watched the bird circle back. "I don't know," Tico replied, his voice filled with awe. "But it's not here by chance. The Nighthawk has a message for us." The bird landed gracefully in the center of the meadow, folding its massive wings. It was larger than Mira had imagined, its feathers black as night, with eyes that seemed to hold the entire sky within them. It looked directly at Mira, its gaze piercing and intense. Mira took a deep breath and stepped forward. "You came to find us," she said. "What do you want to tell us?" The Nighthawk tilted its head, then opened its beak. Instead of a screech, a voice echoed through the meadow, deep and resonant. "The forest is stirring," it said. "A storm is coming, one that will test all who live here. You, Mira, must prepare. The path ahead is darker than you can imagine." Mira felt a chill run down her spine. A storm? What kind of storm? The Nighthawk spread its wings, the wind swirling around it. A storm of magic, old and powerful. It seeks to change the very heart of the forest. And you, Mira, must decide what shape that change will take. Before Mira could ask anything more, the bird took off, its wings beating powerfully as it soared back into the sky. Within moments, it had disappeared into the clouds, leaving the meadow quiet once more. Mira turned to Tico, her heart racing. "Did you hear that? A storm is coming and it's up to us to face it." Tico nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "The gentle forest is not as gentle as it seems. We need to be ready." Mira took a deep breath, looking out over the meadow that had seemed so peaceful just moments ago. The tranquility was gone now, replaced by a sense of urgency. "Then let's get ready," she said, her voice steady. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." And with that, they left the moonlight meadow behind, venturing into the unknown, the promise of the storm looming ahead.
Mira and Tico made their way through the forest, leaving the moonlight meadow behind. The peaceful glow of the meadow still lingered in Mira's mind, but the ominous message from the Nighthawk weighed heavily on her heart. The forest had shifted since their encounter. The air felt charged, as if the entire woodland was holding its breath. "We have to hurry," Tico said, flying in short, anxious bursts ahead of Mira. "The forest is restless. Can you feel it?" Mira nodded, quickening her pace. The gentle breeze that once caressed her face now felt sharp, carrying whispers she couldn't quite decipher. The sunlight that peeked through the canopy had dimmed, casting the forest in an eerie twilight. It felt like they were running out of time. "Where are we headed, Tico?" Mira asked, scanning the forest for any sign of danger. "To the wishing pool," Tico replied. "It's one of the oldest places in the forest, a place of reflection and truth. If we're to prepare for this storm, we need to understand its origins. The pool can show us what we need to know." Mira had heard of the wishing pool in stories. It was said to be a magical spring where the water mirrored not just the surface of the world, but also the depths of the heart. It was a place of clarity, but also of challenge. Many who had looked into its waters had seen things they were not ready to face. "Do you think we'll be able to find the answers we need?" Mira asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Tico glanced back at her, his small eyes filled with determination. "The forest chose you for this journey, Mira. It believes in you, and so do I." Mira felt a swell of gratitude for her tiny companion. She gave him a reassuring smile, though her heart still fluttered with anxiety. The path grew narrower as they pressed on, the trees looming closer together, their branches interlocking like fingers clasped in prayer. The shadows deepened, and the whispering of the wind grew louder, almost like a chant. "The wishing pool is just ahead," Tico said, landing on a low-hanging branch. He pointed with his wing to a small clearing surrounded by tall, ancient trees. Mira stepped into the clearing and caught her breath. The wishing pool lay before her, a small circular spring of crystal-clear water. It was perfectly still, like a mirror made of glass. The surface reflected the sky above, but it also seemed to shimmer with a light from deep within. It was as if the pool held its own secret glow, a soft radiance that pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Mira knelt beside the pool, her reflection staring back at her with wide, curious eyes. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It is," Tico agreed, landing on a rock beside her. "But remember, Mira, the wishing pool shows more than just your face. It reveals the truth that lies beneath. You must be prepared for what you might see." Mira took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I'm ready," she said, though her voice trembled slightly. She leaned closer to the water, her fingers brushing the surface. The ripples spread out, distorting her reflection, and the light from the pool grew brighter. The forest around them fell silent, as if it too was waiting for what the pool would reveal. At first, the water showed only darkness, a deep, inky black that seemed to stretch on forever. Mira's heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her gaze steady, refusing to look away. Slowly, the darkness parted, like storm clouds clearing to reveal the sun. Mira saw herself as a child, running through a sunlit field, her laughter ringing out like music. She was carefree, her hair flying behind her like a banner. Her mother was there too, smiling as she watched from the edge of the field. It was a memory Mira hadn't thought of in years, a moment of pure joy and innocence. But then the scene shifted. The sunlight dimmed, and a cold wind swept through the field. Mira's mother faded away, her smile replaced by a look of sorrow. The young Mira was left alone, her laughter replaced by quiet sobs as she searched for her mother, calling out her name. Mira's breath hitched, tears welling up in her eyes. "I remember this," she whispered. "It was the day she left, the day she disappeared." Tico's voice was soft, filled with empathy. "The pool is showing you the past, Mira. It's helping you remember what you've buried deep inside." Mira wiped her tears away, her chest aching with the weight of the memory. She had tried so hard to forget that day, to push the pain aside. But now it was here, laid bare before her, demanding to be faced. "Why is it showing me this?" Mira asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Because the storm that's coming isn't just in the forest," Tico said gently. "It's inside you too. The forest is connected to your heart, Mira. It feels your pain, your longing. To calm the storm, you must first calm your own heart." Mira took a deep, shuddering breath. "How can I do that? How can I face something I've tried so hard to forget?" Tico hopped closer, his tiny wing resting on her hand. "By letting yourself feel it, all of it, the sadness, the loss, the love that still lingers, you have to accept it, Mira, and then let it go. Only then can you find peace." Mira closed her eyes, letting the tears fall freely now. She thought of her mother, of the warmth of her embrace, the sound of her voice, singing lullabies at night. She let herself feel the pain of losing her, the emptiness that had settled in her heart like a heavy stone. But then she remembered the laughter too, the joy, the love they had shared. It wasn't just the loss that defined their story, it was the moments of happiness, the connection that could never truly fade away. As she opened her eyes, the wishing pool began to glow brighter, its light enveloping her like a soft, comforting hug. The image of the young Mira faded, replaced by a vision of the present. She saw herself standing strong, with Tico by her side, facing the darkness together. The water stilled once more, reflecting Mira's face, but now she looked different. Her eyes were clearer, her expression calm. The ache in her heart was still there, but it was softer now, less sharp. She felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. "You did it, Mira," Tico said, his voice filled with pride. "You faced your memories, and you found the truth within them." Mira smiled through her tears, reaching out to stroke Tico's feathers. "I couldn't have done it without you, Tico. Thank you for believing in me." The little bird nuzzled her hand. "We're in this together, Mira. Always." Mira stood up, looking out over the wishing pool one last time. The storm was still coming. She could feel it in the air, a distant rumble like thunder on the horizon. But now she felt ready to face it, whatever it might bring. "Let's go," she said, her voice strong and steady. "We have a storm to calm." And with that, they left the clearing, the wishing pool's light fading gently behind them as they walked deeper into the heart of the forest, ready for whatever lay ahead. The deeper Mira and Tico ventured into the forest, the more the atmosphere seemed to shift. The trees, once welcoming and open, now grew dense and twisted, their branches curling inward as though trying to shield something from the world. The air was thick, and the once gentle breeze had turned heavy, pressing against Mira's chest, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. "Do you feel that?" Mira asked, glancing around nervously. "It's like the whole forest is waiting." Tico, perched on her shoulder, was unusually quiet. His small, feathered body was tense, and his bright eyes darted nervously between the trees. "The storm is coming," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And it's not just a physical one, it's a storm of shadows, a storm of lost souls." Mira's heart sank. "Lost souls?" she repeated, fear creeping into her voice. "What do you mean?" "The forest holds memories, Mira," Tico explained, his voice growing more serious. "Not just yours, but of all who have walked through it. And sometimes, when the balance is disrupted, when people or creatures leave without closure, those memories turn into shadows. They wander the forest, lost and looking for a way to be seen again." The storm. It's their doing. Mira felt a chill run down her spine. "So these shadows, they're the ones causing the storm?" Tico nodded solemnly. "Yes, they are the embodiment of all that's been left behind, forgotten, unresolved. And when they grow restless, they call out to the forest. The storm is their cry for help, for acknowledgement." The path ahead seemed to narrow, the trees closing in even further, their dark forms almost suffocating. The air was thick with tension, and the distant sounds of the forest had faded into an unsettling silence. Mira's steps faltered as a low, mournful wind began to blow through the branches, carrying with it the faintest echoes of voices. At first, Mira thought it was just her imagination, but the voices grew louder, clearer, whispers of names, lost and long forgotten. "Mira," a voice called, faint but unmistakable. Mira froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She turned, but there was no one behind her. "Mira, help me!" She looked at Tico, her eyes wide with fear. "Did you hear that? Someone's calling my name." Tico's expression darkened. "The shadows are using the memories of the lost to draw you in. They want you to listen, to feel their pain, but you must not let them distract you." "But it sounds so real," Mira said, her voice trembling. She took a step forward, but the forest seemed to pulse around her, as if it was resisting her movement. "What do I do?" "Stay strong," Tico urged. "The storm will grow fiercer the closer we get to its heart. We must face the shadows without being consumed by them. Your heart must remain clear." Mira swallowed, nodding slowly. She took a deep breath and pressed on, trying to ignore the whispers that seemed to swirl around her. Every step felt heavier, as though the forest itself was pulling at her, trying to keep her in place. Suddenly, the wind howled, and a thick mist rolled in, covering the ground like a living blanket. The whispers intensified, growing into a cacophony of voices, all calling out at once. Mira could hear her name repeated over and over, but it wasn't just the forest's voices now. There were other voices, whispers of old memories she didn't recognize, lost stories from people she had never met. Mira. A shadow shifted in the mist, dark and looming, taking shape. Mira's breath caught in her throat. The shadow was tall, with a humanoid shape, but its features were indistinct, shifting like smoke in the wind. It reached out toward her with long, bony hands. "Mira, you've forgotten us," the shadow said, its voice cold and hollow. "You've left us behind. You must remember." Mira stepped back, her pulse quickening. "I don't know who you are," she cried. "Please, leave me alone." The shadow advanced, its form growing darker and more defined. "You will remember," it whispered. "You cannot escape what you've forgotten." Mira's heart raced, and she glanced frantically at Tico. The small bird was standing firm on her shoulder, his feathers fluffed up, his wings spread wide in a protective stance. "Mira, you must face it," Tico said, his voice unwavering. "The shadow is a part of you, a memory you've buried. You have to confront it." Mira's mind raced. "A memory I've buried," she repeated to herself. She stared at the shadow as it loomed closer. She didn't know why, but she felt it. This shadow had something to do with her past, with the things she had long tried to forget. Slowly, Mira stepped forward. The closer she got to the shadow, the more it seemed to grow, swirling like smoke around her. But instead of fear, she felt a strange sense of recognition, a connection that had been lost for so long. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. The shadow's form shifted again, revealing a figure she had seen before, someone she had loved deeply. It was her mother. "Mama!" Mira gasped, her heart twisting with longing. The shadow nodded, its face filled with sorrow. "You've forgotten me, Mira. You've buried me in your heart, hoping I'd fade away, but I'm still here. I always have been." Mira reached out toward the figure, but it faded into the mist, dissolving like smoke in the air. "No!" she cried, her voice breaking. "Please don't go! I've missed you so much!" The forest was silent again, the mist clearing, leaving only the faintest trace of her mother's presence in the air. Mira sank to her knees, overwhelmed by the weight of the memory. Tico fluttered down and perched beside her, his eyes soft with sympathy. "You've faced it," Tico said quietly. "You've confronted the shadow, and now it's at peace." Mira wiped the tears from her eyes, taking a shaky breath. "But why did it have to hurt so much? Why couldn't I just let it go?" Tico leaned close to her ear. "The storm is not just about the past, Mira. It's about healing. Sometimes we need to confront what we've lost before we can truly move on." Mira looked up at the trees around her. The storm had passed for now, the oppressive air lifting, leaving behind a sense of calm she hadn't felt in a long time. The forest was quieter, as if it too was finding peace. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Mira felt stronger. The shadows that had haunted her were no longer just figures to fear. They were memories, and those memories had a place in her heart. "Let's keep going," Mira said, standing up, her heart steadier now. "We have a storm to calm." And with that, they continued deeper into the forest, knowing that with every step, they were getting closer to the truth and to the heart of the storm. The forest had grown eerily quiet after the storm of shadows. The air felt heavy still, as though the trees themselves were waiting for something. The soft rustle of leaves that once greeted Mira now seemed distant, muffled, like a secret too profound to be spoken aloud. Mira's mind was still reeling from the revelation in the mist, the shadow that had been her mother, the memory that had clawed its way back to the surface after so many years. The pain had been sharp, but in its wake, a strange sense of relief had followed. The shadow had been a part of her, and facing it had helped her understand that she could never truly let go of her mother, not in the way she had once believed. Her mother would always be with her, in her heart. Tico had been silent as they walked, his small wings fluttering beside her. He hadn't needed to say anything. He knew how profound this moment was for Mira. The forest, too, seemed to understand, for it remained still, as though allowing her time to heal before the next trial. "We're getting closer," Tico said, breaking the silence. His voice was softer than usual, filled with an unspoken urgency. "The storm is not over, Mira. We're almost at the heart of it." Mira nodded, her eyes scanning the path ahead. The trees were thinning, their trunks growing taller and more twisted as they approached the center of the forest. The shadows grew longer, and the ground beneath her feet felt spongy, like walking on wet moss. It was as though the very earth was alive, breathing in time with her own heartbeat. "Do you think we'll find the source of the storm?" Mira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tico's expression was serious as he turned to look at her. "I'm not sure what we'll find, Mira, but I do know that the forest will show us what we need to see. The heart of the storm is where everything began, where the balance was first broken." As they walked, Mira felt the weight of his words settle over her. The forest was no longer the friendly, welcoming place it had once been. The air had thickened, and every step seemed to echo in the stillness like an uninvited guest. And then, without warning, the forest opened up before them. In the center of the clearing was a massive tree, so tall and wide that its branches seemed to stretch across the sky. Its bark was black as night, smooth and glossy, with veins of glowing silver running through it, pulsing like the rhythm of a heartbeat. The tree was alive, but it was not a living thing she recognized. "It's beautiful," Mira breathed, awe and fear mixing in her chest. But there was something off about the tree. Its very presence seemed to distort the world around it. The air hummed with a strange energy, and Mira felt a coldness creeping up her spine, as though the tree was drawing in everything around it, consuming it. Tico fluttered nervously on her shoulder. "This is it," he said softly. "The heart of the storm. This tree is the source of the imbalance in the forest." Mira took a hesitant step forward. "What is it?" Tico looked up at the tree, his feathers ruffled. "It's the tree of forgotten souls. It was once a protector of the forest, a symbol of life and growth. But something happened to it. The storm, the shadows, they're all connected to the tree's pain." Mira's heart sank as she realized what Tico was implying. "The tree is hurting the forest?" "Yes," Tico replied, his voice heavy with sadness. "The tree has been corrupted. It has absorbed the lost souls of the forest, memories, spirits, hopes that were left unresolved. The storm is a manifestation of its pain. The more souls it absorbs, the stronger it grows, and the more it distorts the forest around it." Mira stepped closer, feeling the pull of the tree's energy, its strange, unsettling presence. "How do we stop it? How do we fix this?" Tico's gaze turned to the glowing veins running through the bark. "We must restore the tree to its original purpose. We must return the lost souls to the forest, give them peace. Only then can the storm be calmed." Mira looked at the tree's twisted form, the dark bark seeming to pulse with an unnatural life. She could feel the storm swirling around her again, the air thickening with the same oppressive energy she had felt earlier. It was as though the tree was aware of her presence, watching her, waiting for her to make a move. "How do we release the souls?" Mira asked, desperation creeping into her voice. "How do we help them?" Tico fluttered to the ground, his wings glowing faintly in the dim light. "The souls are trapped in the tree's heart," he explained. "We need to speak their names, to acknowledge them. Only then will they be able to move on, to return to the forest and restore the balance." Mira took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the task ahead of her. She stepped closer to the tree, her heart pounding in her chest. The whispers of lost souls filled the air again, their voices distant and pleading. She could feel their sadness, their yearning for release. Her own emotions welled up, the weight of all that had been left unspoken in her own heart rising to the surface. With trembling hands, Mira placed her palm on the cool bark of the tree. The instant she touched it, a wave of energy shot through her, sending a chill down her spine. The tree seemed to respond, its glowing veins pulsing more rapidly, the storm around them growing fiercer. Mira's head swam with the echoes of the lost souls, their cries reverberating in her mind. "Mira!" Tico called out, his voice urgent. "You have to focus. Call to the souls, to the ones who need to be remembered." Mira closed her eyes, drawing on every ounce of strength within her. She thought of the lost souls, of all the forgotten memories, and her heart ached for them. "I see you," she whispered, her voice steady despite the storm raging around them. "I hear you. I won't forget you." The tree's energy pulsed harder, and Mira felt a surge of emotion wash over her. The memories of those long gone, of those lost to time and pain, began to surface. Names she had never known filled her thoughts. She spoke them aloud, one by one, calling out to the lost souls. "I remember you," she said, her voice echoing through the clearing. "I remember your pain, your love, your stories. You are not forgotten." As she spoke, the tree began to tremble, its glowing veins flickering with light. The storm around them began to subside, the oppressive weight of the forest lifting as the voices of the lost souls faded, leaving behind a profound silence. Mira opened her eyes, her body trembling from the intensity of the moment. The tree stood still before her, no longer pulsing with dark energy, but instead glowing with a soft, peaceful light. The storm had passed. "The balance has been restored," Tico said, his voice filled with awe. "You did it, Mira. You gave them peace." Mira looked at the tree, her heart full of both sorrow and relief. "They're free," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "They can finally rest." Tico flew up to her shoulder, nuzzling her gently. "And so can the forest." Mira smiled faintly, feeling the weight of the forest's gratitude in the air around her. The storm was over, and the forest was at peace once more. But Mira knew that this was only the beginning of her journey. There would be more challenges, more trials to face. Yet for now, the forest was calm. "We've done it, Tico," she said softly. "We've calmed the storm." Tico chirped in agreement. "And together we'll face whatever comes next." With that, they turned and began walking back into the heart of the forest, ready for whatever the future would hold. The calm that had settled over the forest was more than just the absence of the storm. It was a deep, profound silence, like the earth itself was taking a long, steady breath after a stormy night. The once heavy air now felt light and fresh, as if the forest had been washed clean. Birds began to sing again, their songs rising like notes of a long-lost melody, filling the void left by the storm's rage. Even the trees seemed to stand a little taller, their leaves rustling in a gentle breeze that had returned to bring life back to the woods. Mira felt a sense of relief settle into her chest. The burden of the forest's pain had been lifted, but she knew the work wasn't done yet. The shadows had been calmed, the storm quelled, but there were still pieces of the forest story left to uncover. And more importantly, there was still the question of her own role in all of this. She had faced the shadows, helped the lost souls find peace. But what now? What did it all mean? Tico fluttered beside her, his small form like a beacon in the quiet. "It's not over yet," he said, his voice softer now, almost as if speaking to the very air around them. "There's still much for you to learn, Mira." She looked at him, sensing that his words weren't just about the forest. There was something deeper, something more personal that he was hinting at. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice calm, but tinged with curiosity. Tico's bright eyes met hers, and for the first time there was a hint of sadness in them. "The forest is healing, but so are you," he said gently. "There are still pieces of your own heart that need to be mended." The storm of shadows wasn't just about the forest, Mira. It was about you too. Mira stopped in her tracks, a chill running down her spine. "What do you mean?" "I faced my mother's shadow. I faced the lost souls. Isn't that enough?" Tico's gaze softened. "You've begun to heal. But there's still something you need to understand. The storm wasn't just a test of your courage, it was a test of your heart. And until you find the music that lives inside you, the song of your soul, you won't truly be at peace." Mira felt a wave of confusion. "The song of my soul?" she repeated, shaking her head. "I don't understand. I don't even know what that means." Tico flitted closer, landing on a branch just above her head. "The forest speaks in many ways, Mira. It sings songs of life, of growth, of loss, and of hope. But there is a song that lives within you, a song that ties you to this place. Until you find that song, you'll never truly understand your place in the world, and the forest will never fully heal." Mira felt the weight of his words sink in. She had come so far, fought so many battles, physical and emotional, but there was something inside her that still felt incomplete. The missing piece, the thing she couldn't quite grasp. She had been searching for answers, but now she realized the answers were not outside of her. They were within. "I don't know if I can find it," she whispered, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I've lost so much, so many pieces of myself. I'm not sure I even know where to start." Tico tilted his head, considering her words. "That's the first step, Mira. Acknowledge that you're lost. Acknowledge that you don't have all the answers. The song is inside you, but you need to listen for it, to feel it. It's the rhythm of your heart, the truth of your soul, and it has always been there, waiting for you to find it." Mira closed her eyes, the forest's quiet hum surrounding her like a gentle embrace. She breathed in deeply, trying to calm the storm within her own heart. It had been so long since she had truly listened to herself, to the music of her spirit. She had been so focused on the external, on the forest's suffering, on the pain of the shadows, that she had forgotten to care for the song that was uniquely hers. Tico was right. She needed to listen. Slowly, Mira allowed herself to sink into the silence of the forest, letting go of her thoughts and fears. She let the sounds of the wind, the rustling of the leaves, and the songs of the birds fill her senses. There was something here, a connection, a rhythm that pulsed just beyond the edges of her awareness. The more she allowed herself to be still, the clearer it became. The music was gentle at first, like the soft rustle of the wind in the trees, the echo of distant laughter, the rhythm of footsteps on the earth. But as she listened more closely, it grew stronger, more distinct, until she could hear it inside her, an old, familiar melody that had been with her for as long as she could remember. It was her own song, her own heart's rhythm, the pulse of her life. Tears welled up in her eyes as she finally recognized it. It was the song of her childhood, of the love she had once felt, of the dreams she had once held. It was the song of her mother, of her family, of the warmth she had lost, and the hope she had buried. It was everything that made her who she was. The song had never left her. It had just been waiting for her to listen. Tico watched her with quiet understanding. "You found it," he said softly. "The song was always within you. It was just waiting for you to acknowledge it." Mira nodded, wiping her tears away, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. For the first time in a long while, she felt whole. She had faced the darkness of the forest and the shadows of her past. But it was this understanding of her own heart, that was the true healing. "Thank you, Tico," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. I think I understand now." The little bird perched on her shoulder, his wings fluttering gently. "It's not the end, Mira, but it's a beginning. You've healed the forest, but now it's time for you to heal yourself. And when you do, the world will heal with you." Mira felt a surge of warmth, a new energy flooding her veins. She stood up straighter, her heart lighter than it had been in years. The forest around her seemed to come alive again, its colors brighter, its life more vivid. The balance was restored, not just in the trees, but within her own soul. "We've done it," she said softly. "We've healed." Tico chirped, his voice full of pride. "Together we have, and together we will continue." And so, Mira took her first step toward the future, with the song of her heart guiding her forward. The forest was no longer a place of shadows and storms. It was a place of peace, of life, and of growth. And as Mira walked through the woods, she knew that the song of the forest and of her soul would carry her through whatever came next. The morning light spilled through the canopy, casting dappled shadows on the soft earth beneath Mira's feet. The air felt alive with the hum of the forest, its rhythm echoing in her soul. The storm had passed, the shadows had been calmed, and now all that remained was the tranquil beauty of the world she had helped heal. The forest, once heavy with sorrow, now stood in peaceful harmony, its leaves swaying in the breeze like a lullaby sung by the earth itself. Mira walked deeper into the heart of the forest, her heart light and full of purpose. She had found her song, the rhythm that lived within her, connecting her to the forest, to the spirits, to everything. And with that song, she knew she was no longer just a visitor in this magical world. She was a part of it, a part of the balance that tied everything together. Tico fluttered beside her, his tiny wings a blur of motion as he flew in circles around her. "You did it, Mira," he said, his voice full of joy. "The forest is at peace, and so are you." Mira smiled, her eyes shining with the kind of peace she had never known before. "I couldn't have done it without you, Tico. You've been with me every step of the way." The little bird landed on her shoulder, his feathers soft against her skin. "And you, Mira, have been the one to heal this place. You've restored the balance, both here and within yourself." Mira stopped walking for a moment, looking around at the towering trees, the soft moss beneath her feet, and the glimmering streams that now flowed peacefully through the forest. Everything felt vibrant and alive, the colors more vivid than she had ever seen them before. The harmony that filled the air was palpable. "You know," she said, her voice thoughtful, "when I first came here, I didn't understand any of this. I thought I was just lost, that the forest was just a place I stumbled into. But now I see everything here is connected, including me." Tico nodded, his bright eyes full of understanding. "The forest has always been connected to you, Mira. You were never truly lost. You were just waiting for the right time to find your place in it." Mira's gaze softened as she looked at the horizon, where the morning light touched the trees with a golden glow. Her journey had been long, filled with trials and heartache, but in the end, it had all led her here, home. "I've learned so much," she murmured, "about the forest, about the shadows, about my own heart. I used to think healing meant erasing pain, but now I understand. Healing means embracing it. It means accepting every part of you, even the broken pieces." Tico chirped in agreement. "Exactly. You've learned to listen, to understand the music within you, and to honor it. That is the true way to heal." Mira took a deep breath, letting the forest's air fill her lungs. It was a deep, rich scent of earth and life, of growth and renewal, and she felt as though every cell in her body was in perfect harmony with it. "There's one more thing I've realized," she said softly, almost to herself. "The forest, it's not just a place. It's a song, a story that's always unfolding. and I'm a part of that story, just as much as every tree, every animal, every whisper in the wind." Tico smiled, his tiny form fluttering up to rest on her outstretched hand. "And so are we all, Mira. Each of us has a part to play, a note to sing in the eternal melody of the world." Mira's heart swelled with gratitude as she gazed out at the forest. She knew now that the forest would always be a part of her, just as she would always be a part of it. The balance had been restored, not just in the world around her, but within her own soul. She had healed, and now she was ready to live, to grow, and to sing her song. The wind picked up, carrying the melodies of the forest with it, songs of renewal, of life, of connection. Mira closed her eyes, allowing herself to be enveloped by the music. It was a melody she would carry with her always, a reminder of everything she had learned. As she opened her eyes again, she saw the first rays of the sun piercing through the canopy, casting a warm glow over the land. The storm had passed, and the forest stood strong, vibrant, and full of life. And Mira knew that in the end, this was the greatest lesson of all, that peace, true peace, comes not from the absence of hardship, but from the acceptance and healing of all things, both light and dark. Tico perched on her shoulder once more, his voice soft and knowing. "The forest has always been here, Mira. It's always been waiting for you to find your place within it. And now that you have, the world will always sing with you." Mira smiled, her heart full, as she took one last look at the forest, knowing that this chapter of her journey was only the beginning. And as the wind danced through the trees, she whispered to herself the words that had come to her so many times along the way.
The song never ends, it only changes, and we are all part of it. Healing is not about forgetting the past. It's about making peace with it and finding the song that brings you home. What song is your soul trying to sing? Can you remember a moment when you felt truly at peace with yourself, like Mira did in the forest? Share your thoughts and let the music of your heart guide you.